Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're taking a journey into the darker and creepier side of history. And we're starting our unsettling deep dive with a look at historic events that are way scarier than any horror movie.
Bad luck plagued her from the beginning. On her maiden voyage, her master fell fatally ill.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 creepiest historic events that are scarier than horror movies. For this list, we're looking at the most terrifying historical tragedies and incredible events that would make fitting content for a horror film. What would you do if you found yourself in these predicaments? Number 20, the funeral procession of Pope Pius XII. Pope Pius XII served as the Vatican sovereign from 1939 until his death in 1958 at the age of 82. Due to the Pope's insistence on keeping his deceased body the way God created it, his personal physician, Riccardo Galeazzi-Lisi, decided on an unconventional embalming method.
I told you he didn't want to be embalmed or made up.
But people need a viewing.
Galeazzi-Lisi refused to drain the corpse of its fluids, instead relying on an experimental series of oils and resins and wrapping the body in plastic afterwards. The intense heat in the area, combined with the lack of air circulation, caused the cadaver to decompose. During the funeral procession, the chest of the corpse imploded. The body ended up turning a bright green.
None of us could breathe. Somewhere under those bushes was the rest of Ray Brower.
Number 19. The Essex inspires Moby Dick. On August 12, 1819, the whaling ship Essex left Nantucket for a trip to South America. The voyage lasted a little over a year before tragedy struck in November 1820. A massive sperm whale attacked the ship and essentially sank it, causing the survivors to enter small whaleboats. They floundered in these little vessels for over 3 months on the open ocean, with barely enough food and supplies to survive.
Hey, what are y'all looking at? I'm fine. Captain Pollard, fit as a fiddle. Fit as a goddamn fiddle. You hear me?
Slowly, the men began dying, and the others had to resort to consuming their companions. At some point, they even drew lots to determine who would be killed to feed the group. Only 8 of the 21 men survived, and the story inspired Herman Melville to write his great American novel.
The great shroud of the sea rolls over the Pequod, her crew, and Moby Dick.
Number 18. The Nutty Putty Cave Incident. John Edwards Jones suffered an absolutely horrific death that is quite literally the stuff of nightmares. On the evening of November 24, 2009, Jones was exploring Utah's Nutty Putty Cave with his brother when he became trapped. The 26-year-old had mistaken a tight passageway for the infamous birth canal and found himself stuck upside down.
Stuck in that position for going on 23 hours now makes it very difficult for him.
His body remained compressed and inverted for 28 hours. Rescue workers attempted to free Jones using a rope and pulley system, but their efforts failed. Due to his precarious position, his heart went into cardiac arrest and he eventually passed away. It was decided that Jones's corpse would remain in place and that he would be entombed within the now sealed cave.
You promised to tell Emily that no matter what, I'll be there when the baby is born.
Number 17. Minnie Dean. New Zealand established capital punishment in 1840, and it was completely abolished by 1989. In that time, 85 inmates were executed. Minnie Dean was the only woman to receive that fate. Dean worked as a baby farmer. Basically, she was paid to adopt other people's children.
Look, I don't have time for all these legalities.
1 second, Dad. I have the adoption papers.
She took in numerous kids, and many started dying or disappearing. While infant mortality was high at the time, the deaths were exceeding the norm, and Dean started attracting attention. She was eventually arrested for homicide. Due to lax record-keeping, it's hard to determine how many people died under Dean's care. However, 3 bodies were unearthed in her garden following her arrest. She was hanged on September 2, 1844. Number 16. The death of Maximilien Robespierre. French lawyer Maximilien Robespierre is one of the defining and most divisive names of the French Revolution. Although initially beloved, Robespierre's ambitions grew too great, which eventually corroded his public reputation.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Oh, il parle encore.
Réveille-moi quand il aura fini.
Upon his arrest on July 27, 1794, Robespierre reportedly attempted to take his own life with a pistol but failed. The incident left him with a damaged jaw, which was kept together with a bandage. He was then taken to the Place de la Révolution to be executed. The officer in charge, Charles-Henri Sanson, removed the bandage, leaving Robespierre's jaw to hang loose. He was reportedly in pain until he was beheaded.
Notez, nous devons fermer les portes de la ville, interdire tous les journaux, arrêter tous les journalistes, et lancer des mandats d'arrêt contre les meneurs de la Convention.
Number 15, the Donner Party. Composed of multiple pioneer families, the Donner Party sought to move from the Midwest to California in the mid-1840s. Halfway into the trip, the group decided to take a new shortcut called the Hastings Cutoff, which was a much more difficult terrain to cross. As they traveled further, they became snowbound in the Sierra Nevada, and the wagon train was unable to penetrate the snow.
We have to leave the wagon! Keep them moving! They can go no further! Unhitch the animals!
To survive the harsh winter, the party was forced to camp at the nearby Truckee Lake. The cold in this region soon became unbearable, leading to the deaths of multiple people. With very little supplies, the survivors had to resort to consuming their deceased companions. In all of the party's 87 members, only 48 lived to tell the tale.
They had to resort to cannibalism in order to stay alive.
Number 14, the experiments of Nikolai Krasnogorsky. Soviet neurologist Ivan Pavlov is famous for his conditioning experiments on dogs, resulting in the widely used term Pavlovian response.
See, Pavlov was a science guy, and every time his dog would ring a bell, Pavlov would eat.
But what many do not know is that his tinkerings led to a devastating outcome. Pavlov had an assistant named Nikolai Krasnogorsky, who continued with his mentor's experiments. However, this assistant conducted his test on young subjects he acquired through orphanages. The subjects were outfitted with a device that measured the amount of saliva emanating directly from their glands when they were given food. Unfortunately, the method of installing these devices was frankly atrocious. Krasnogorsky experimented on these test subjects, presumably in a bid to prove that humans can be easily conditioned, just like dogs.
Stop it, please, I beg you! It's a sin!
Number 13, Jonestown. American preacher Jim Jones created a doomsday cult called the People's Temple. In the 1970s, Jones moved his congregation to an isolated area in Guyana, where they established a remote settlement called Jonestown. That became the site of one of the most infamous crimes involving American lives.
Started as an effort by a charismatic preacher to build a new society, but it ended, of course, with the tragic deaths of more than 900 people.
After disturbing details from the settlement came to light, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana with some concerned relatives of the Jonestown members. Concluding that his cult had failed, Jones reportedly ordered the killing of Ryan, who was later shot at a nearby airstrip. Jones then led his entire congregation to ingest a drink poisoned with cyanide. This resulted in the deaths of 909 people, becoming one of the worst massacres in American history.
We've had as much of this world as you're going to get. Let's just be done with it. Let's be done with the agony of it.
Number 12, the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Does the situation outside of you, the institution, come to control your behavior, or does the things inside of you, your attitudes, your values, your morality?
If you need proof that power corrupts, look no further than the highly controversial Stanford Prison Experiment. This social test was conducted from August 14th through the 20th, 1971, and saw student volunteers playing fake prisoners and prison authorities. The goal of the experiment, led by Professor Philip Zimbardo, was to study the effects of unchecked power in prison guards.
The negative environment Zimbardo chose to test his ideas was a prison. He would convert the basement of the university's psychology department into a subterranean jail.
The experiment quickly flew off the rails, with some of the guard students veering into psychological torture by enacting extreme measures, including psychological abuse and harassment. That said, the experiment's methodology is extremely contentious, as it had repeatedly been compromised by Zimbardo's goading. Some of the prisoners also knew the study's hypothesis and acted accordingly, which is an unwanted variable in psychological experiments called demand characteristics.
At this rate, we're gonna be here all goddamn night. And I love it.
Number 11, Octavia Hatcher. The story of Octavia Hatcher is a popular one around the small town of Pikeville, Kentucky. The legend states that the young mother fell sick and passed away a few months after she gave birth to a son, who died shortly after delivery. Due to the southern heat, they buried her very quickly. Soon after her death, however, other locals seemingly showed similar symptoms, only to recover. The culprit, retrospectively, was likely encephalitis. Locals promptly dug up Hatcher's grave and realized that she didn't die, but had fallen into a coma. They found evidence of her having woken up, including scratches on the coffin and Hatcher's bloody nails. The veracity of the story has been questioned, but according to a member of Big Sandy Heritage Center's board of directors, quote, most local historians do agree that Hatcher did fall ill and was buried alive. Number 10. The Curse of King Tut. Even if you don't believe in curses, there's no denying that there's something spooky about this story.
I believe if I can see it and I can touch it, then it's real. That's what I believe.
I believe in being prepared.
Egyptologist Howard Carter found the tomb of King Tutankhamun in 1922, and various members of his team were immediately struck with health issues. The first to die was financier Lord Carnarvon, who passed away from blood poisoning after a mosquito bite became infected. Within a dozen years, more people involved in the excavation were dead, including Carter's personal secretary Richard Bethel. Carter himself died in 1939, nearly 20 years after opening the tomb. But his death is still attributed to the curse. The story even attracted the attention of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who linked Carnarvon's death to mythical beings called elementals.
I don't think I'm a nut. Don't want no fancy funeral. Just one like old King Tut.
Number 9. Advice to animal owners. Can you imagine killing your own pet? Unfortunately, that was a reality that many in pre-World War II Britain were forced to face. Pets were seen as an unwanted nuisance in wartime, as they would either roam the streets following a bombing or eat the already limited and rationed food. A committee was formed to solve the problem, and their solution was unimaginably horrific. They released a pamphlet advising pet owners to either release them into the countryside or have them euthanized. Included in the papers was an ad for a captive bolt pistol, said to be, quote, the standard instrument for the humane destruction of domestic animals. All told, an estimated 750,000 pets were killed in a week, more than 107,000 per day. Number 8. Recycling deceased soldiers.
If there is anything in this world about which I know positively nothing, it is agriculture.
Turns out there's nothing better for farming than human bone. The Napoleonic Wars cost upwards of 2 million soldiers their lives, and it was common practice for the survivors to loot the dead for supplies. This included tearing out teeth with pliers for use in dentures. The Battle of Waterloo proved especially fruitful for the denture market, and the resulting products became known as Waterloo teeth. Battlegrounds were also looted for bones after the dead had decomposed, and these bones were ground into dust and sold to farmers. A British paper from 1822 reported that human bone made for, quote, substantial manure. Number 7. Knocking in space.
You copy?
Yes, I copy. I'm
Give me your position.
I don't know. I'm spinning. I can't.
Imagine you're an astronaut and you're all alone floating through the quiet vacuum of space in your cozy little spacecraft. And then you hear someone or something knocking. It's enough to make you go mad.
But the thing is that I'm still scared. I'm really scared. Nobody will mourn for me. No one will pray for my soul.
Luckily, astronaut and famed knock hearer Yang Li Wei didn't go mad, but he was understandably creeped out. Li Wei attempted to replicate the knocking sound after returning to Earth, but nothing proved successful. Future Chinese astronauts also reported hearing the eerie knocking sound, leading some to believe it was caused by the spacecraft itself. The source was later attributed to changes in air pressure and temperature morphing the capsule's inner wall. Mundane explanation aside, we couldn't imagine how utterly terrifying that experience would be.
Dallas, are you sure there is no sign of it? I mean, it is there. It's gotta be around there.
Number 6. Hinterkaifeck murders. There are literally countless creepy true crime stories, but there's just something really unsettling about the infamous Hinterkaifeck murders. These took place at a farm in Bavaria, Germany in 1922. Prior to the murders, Andreas Gruber found human foot tracks in the snow leading from the nearby forest to his house. That night, the family heard footsteps coming from the attic, but failed to notify the police. On March 31st, every member of the household, including their daughter, her grandchildren, and their maid, were killed. It would be 4 days until the bodies were discovered. The still unknown murderer had long made their escape. This unsolved case truly has it all: gruesome violence, no survivors, an unidentified culprit, and an incredibly creepy case of home invasion. Number 5. The sad but creepy case of Henry Rathbone.
Shakespeare, how do you do? It's a great pleasure to meet you.
Everyone knows of Lincoln's assassination, but the role played by Major Henry Rathbone is less common knowledge. Rathbone and his fiancée were attending the play with Lincoln, and Rathbone tried subduing John Wilkes Booth after he shot the president. His artery was severed in the process. Rathbone survived, but he blamed himself for Lincoln's death and spiraled into insanity. On December 23, 1883, he assaulted his own children, and when his wife intervened, he took care of her before stabbing himself in a failed attempt at his own life.
I'm not gonna hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said, I'm not gonna hurt you.
When police arrived, they found a deranged Rathbone and his wife's corpse. Number 4. Chernobyl. The world held its breath throughout the spring of 1986, desperately hoping that their respective areas wouldn't be inundated with radiation. On April 26th, a reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded, sending enormous plumes of radiation into the atmosphere. This radiation was then carried far and wide by the wind.
Who's the next closest?
It's Chernobyl, but that's not possible. They're 400 kilometers away.
Oh, that's too far for 8 mini Röntgen. They'd have to be split open.
It was given the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, and it resulted in an extensive cleanup effort that took years and billions of dollars to complete. Nearby cities were completely evacuated and are now eerie ghost towns. Many people also suffered unimaginably horrible deaths from acute radiation syndrome as their bodies shut down. Chernobyl was a living nightmare that struck the fear of radiation into millions.
What happened there, what happened after, even the good we did. All of it. All of it. Madness.
Number 3. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius. The ancient Romans experienced hell on Earth in 79 AD when Mount Vesuvius famously erupted. The eruption launched a massive cloud of gas and debris 21 miles into the air, effectively blocking out the sun. This in turn caused a tsunami in the Bay of Naples, and ash rained down on nearby cities. The volcano later released pyroclastic flows, which are essentially 18,000 degree Fahrenheit clouds of gas and volcanic matter that can travel upwards of 400 miles per hour.
This distinct layer of solidified ash is evidence of a high-speed current of heated gas and volcanic debris. Known as a pyroclastic flow,
the flows decimated the nearby cities and killed people instantly, vaporizing their blood and organs. The eruption buried the cities of Pompeii, Herculaneum, Oplontis, and Stabii, killing at least 1,500 people based on the human remains uncovered, but likely many more.
The exact nature of the pyroclastic density current. In some instances, it's very, very light and fluffy, but you can have temperatures from 200 degrees centigrade up to maybe 700 degrees centigrade. That's not unheard of.
Number 2. The Mary Celeste.
Bad luck plagued her from the beginning. On her maiden voyage, her master fell fatally ill.
Ghost ship stories are a dime a dozen, but none is as arguably popular as the Mary Celeste. This was a sailing vessel built in Canada and named the Amazon before it was wrecked and sold to American buyers, who renamed her the Mary Celeste. On December 4th, 1872, the ghost ship was found floating off the Azores Islands.
It was not leaking. The sails were damaged, those that were up and had not been furled were damaged. Aside from that, there was no real structural damage to the boat.
The ship was in good condition, there was nothing recent in her captain's log, her provisions were undisturbed, and the crew's belongings were still on board. However, the lifeboat was missing, leading many to wonder why the crew had abandoned ship. Naturally, conspiracy theories abound to this day. And while numerous sound theories have been put forth over the years, the mystery remains unsolved.
But the riddle of that ill-fated voyage in 1872 will haunt us forever. The mystery of the Mary Celeste will live on.
Number 1. Plague, Riots, and Refugees.
For 3 horrifying years between 1348 and 1350, the Black Death pushed medieval man to the brink of an apocalypse.
The Black Death wasn't just the deadliest epidemic of infectious disease in human history. It killed an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's entire population. Seriously, the entry can just end here.
For the Almighty has said, I shall wipe man whom I created off the face of the earth.
But it also turned into what's probably the closest thing we've ever had to a real-life zombie movie. London quarantined plague victims inside their homes, and armed guards were reportedly stationed nearby to prevent escape. This didn't sit well with the quarantined, and they often fought back by attacking, and in some cases, murdering the guards.
Law and order broke down. Tight-knit communities broke apart.
This led entire neighborhoods to be quarantined, which only instigated rioting and more death. If some plague victims happened to escape, they wandered the countryside pretty much like zombies, as no towns or villages would permit them entry. In some cases, they were even attacked on the road by the healthy.
In one 6-week period, 11,000 people are buried in a single graveyard.
Let's face it, history has spun a web of terrifying mysteries and coincidences. So warning, this next list might just make you paranoid.
It was an aura of not being welcomed. I mean, the devil was I really sincerely believe that the devil didn't want the picture to be made.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're examining 10 creepy coincidences that will make you paranoid.
When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble. A casket tomb should never be opened.
For this list, we're looking at strange historic incidents seemingly foreshadowing future events that will keep you and us up at night. Has a creepy coincidence ever happened in your life? The War Car. In June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife, Sophie, Duchess of Oeynberg, were assassinated by Gavrilo Princip. This event is seen as the trigger that sparked World War I. From that day, the couple's Greff und Stift touring vehicle became a prize piece in museums. But it wasn't until 2004, when UK national Brian Presland visited the car in Vienna, Austria, that things got strange. He noticed the vehicle's original license plate of AIII-118 was a bizarre coincidence. The numerals and numbers could be interpreted as November 11th, 1918, while the letter A in English could stand for armistice, making it the day the Great War ended. Wrestling Wiki. In June 2007, WWE wrestler Chris Benoit committed a horrific crime.
At this time, no one knew what happened, so WWE is just thinking that Chris Benoit has passed away, along with Nancy and Daniel.
Around 14 hours before the police arrived at Benoit's property, his wiki page was edited. It claimed the wrestler had been replaced at an upcoming WWE event with another wrestler after his wife Nancy's death. To make it weirder, the IP address of the anonymous editor was located where the WWE's headquarters are, in Stamford, Connecticut. A second update to the post had their IP in Australia. As people began to pick up on this, the secret Connecticut editor reportedly made a statement claiming they had seen rumors online about Nancy and posted that on the page. They described it all as a huge, quote, coincidence.
No matter what happened that weekend, Chris Benoit's story was going to have a tragic end.
Booth brother. The family name Booth doesn't exactly have a positive connection to the Lincoln lineage, considering what happened on that fateful day in 1865 when John Wilkes Booth assassinated U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. Yet before this day, his son Robert Todd Lincoln was at a train depot, most likely in Jersey City. He fell off the platform and into danger of being squashed by train cars. Suddenly, Lincoln was dragged back to safety. As he turned to thank the person, he realized it was the famous actor Edwin Booth, the brother of John Wilkes.
And it turns out that the man whose life Edwin Booth
the brother of the man who assassinated Lincoln. The life he has saved is the life of Robert Lincoln, the only son of Abraham Lincoln.
I love those stories.
The exact date of this incident is debated. The Library of Congress claims it happened in April 1865, the same month as the assassination.
And he must have been like, you'll thank me now, but once you find out who I am...
Twain's Comet. There aren't many flying space rocks as famous as Halley's Comet, mostly down to it being the only one people can see with just their eyes.
Halley's Comet has embroidered the last 2,000 years of history, having been observed and recorded during each of its passages since 240 BC.
During one of its appearances around the Earth in 1835, it heralded the birth of one of America's best authors, Mark Twain, who came into existence a couple of months later when the comet was at its nearest point of direct orbit around the sun.
Called by many the father of American literature.
In 1909, the Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn creator made an eerie prediction as the rock was set to arrive the following year. Twain stated that he came in with it, he expected to go out with it too. And in April 1910, Halley's Comet made its triumphant return. That same month, Twain passed away from a heart attack.
At the age of 74, Mark Twain died at his Connecticut home on April 21st, 1910.
Ominous Omen. It was a film about the Antichrist, and 1976's The Omen was seemingly cursed, as the cast and crew were affected by terrible accidents and near misses. Lead actor Gregory Peck, executive producer Mace Neufeld, and writer David Seltzer each had their planes struck by lightning.
Got hit by lightning. 3 days later, David Seltzer was on the same flight. His plane was hit by lightning.
While producer Harvey Bernhardt was almost hit when filming in Rome, Italy. During post-production, special effects supervisor John Richardson and assistant Liz Moore were in a car accident on Friday the 13th.
He was driving and had a head-on accident.
Moore perished in a similar vein to Keith Jennings in the film. A canceled plane for Gregory Peck ended up crashing with no survivors. One of the animal handlers for the baboons used in the movie was fatally attacked by a tiger the day after filming.
We had all these things happen. Are they omens? Because is there something bigger? I say no, it's just an incredible coincidence.
The German November. In 1848, the Schicksalstag, or Day of Fate, began in Germany, which would haunt them for decades. With the execution of politician Robert Blum after the Vienna Uprising, the date of November 9th would play a pivotal role in German history. In 1918, Emperor Wilhelm II was removed from the throne on November 9th and abdicated in disgrace after World War I. In 1923, the coup led by Adolf Hitler, known as the Beer Hall Putsch, collapsed on the familiar date. Then, in 1938, the infamous violent event against Jewish people, known as the Night of Broken Glass, or Kristallnacht, began on the same day.
The attackers were paramilitary forces and non-Jewish civilians.
November 9th would come into German play once again in 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down, removing the separation from East and West Germany.
The wall that the East Germans put up in 1961 to keep its people in will now be breached by anybody who wants to leave.
The Unsinkable Nurse. If you were getting on an ocean liner in the 1910s and saw the name Violet Jessup working on board, we wouldn't blame you for wanting to get off. In 1911, she was a stewardess for the RMS Olympic when it smashed into the HMS Hawk. Both ships survived the encounter. A year later, Jessup was working on the RMS Titanic when it famously struck an iceberg and sank. After all that trauma, we wouldn't blame her for never getting on a boat again, but she did.
Violet Jessup left White Star shortly after Titanic's sinking to work for other shipping companies.
In 1916, Jessup was working on the HMHS Britannic, which had been turned into a hospital ship during the war.
Jessup was rescued. More than 20 of her shipmates died.
The vessel exploded and sunk after hitting a German mine. Jessup continued working on ships until 1950.
She lived alone in this small country cottage until her death in 1971 at the age of 84.
Founding Fathers' Fatalities. July 4th is seen as a special day in the United States of America. After all, it celebrates the ratification of the Declaration of Independence from the UK in 1776. But that summer date also has some dark overtones for the founding fathers of the nation. For starters, the second U.S. president, John Adams, passed away on July 4th, 1826, which was also the 50th anniversary of the Declaration. His successor, the third president, Thomas Jefferson, perished at 83 years old on exactly the same date.
Two of those who signed it, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, they died on the very same day, and that day was the 4th of July.
Then, 5 years later in 1831, the 5th president of the U.S., James Monroe, also passed away on July 4th at 73.
10 months later, he too died, the third president to die on the 4th of July.
Author's prediction. Better known for his poetry and short stories, author Edgar Allan Poe also wrote one completed novel in 1838's The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. In it, the ship Grampus is wrecked by a storm and has little food and water. So, the remaining crew drew straws to see who would be sacrificed to feed their hunger, and it fell to Richard Parker for this task. Well, in 1884, the yacht Mignonette set sail in real life from Southampton, England. With the ship broken from strong winds and waves, the crew boarded a lifeboat. However, they lacked enough provisions, so they too drew straws, and it was the cabin boy that was selected. To make it more unsettling, his name was Richard Parker. Timur's Terror Tomb. Timur, also known as Tamerlane, was a ruthless ruler of the Timurid Empire who began his reign in 1370. It's believed he's responsible for the slaying of 17 million people. According to legend, in June 1941, the Soviet Union's Mikhail Mikhailovich Gerasimov and Tashmuhamed Kari-Niyazov led an excavation of the Guramir, the mausoleum of Timur. They discovered two warnings on his tomb. One that stated when Timur rises, the world shall tremble. And the second claimed, quote, "Whosoever disturbs my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I." A few days later, Germany invaded the USSR.
In the summer of 1941, Hitler orders a surprise invasion of the Soviet Union.
In late 1942, Timur's remains were reburied at Guramir.
Stalin had then ordered the remains to be buried with full Islamic rites, which according to the legend brought about a reversal of fortune for the Nazis.
By February 1943, the USSR had won the Battle of Stalingrad, a key turning point in World War II.
Victory, but at an incredible cost.
It turns out some of the world's biggest mysteries stem from one single picture. So check out these upcoming haunting photos that defy explanation.
And those photographs were published all around the world, and nobody's been able to prove that the images are not real.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 creepiest unsolved photo mysteries.
The camera looks down through the doorway and sees in as far as here.
Stephen Michalak was tested for radiation poisoning.
Skunky! Skunky! Arr, skunky!
For this list, we're looking at creepy, unsettling, or bizarre photos with unexplained backstories. Do you have an explanation for any of these pictures? Number 20. The White Lady of Worsted Church. A couple's trip to Norfolk's Worsted Church produced what's arguably one of the most convincing ghost pictures in modern history. Peter Berthelot snapped a photo of his wife praying alone on one of the church benches. When the photo was developed, it showed that the wife was not alone at all, as there appears to be a whitish figure sitting behind her. Further investigation revealed that the ghost of an 1800s healer called the White Lady was long believed to haunt the church grounds, and that the photo apparently captured the entity. Diane Berthelot believed in the validity of the photo so much that it resurrected her religious verve. Number 19. The Extra Hand. Back in 2013, Reddit hosted a thread about glitch in the Matrix events that its users had experienced. One of the most popular stories from the thread came from user The Forbidden One. They included a photo of 4 young boys, each of whom can be seen making a hand gesture. On the right side of the photo, between the shirtless boy and the one in black, is a mysterious hand giving a thumbs up. The hand obviously does not belong to any of the boys, and the poster claimed to have no idea who it belonged to. So how the heck did that mystery thumb come to be? Or do we even want to know?
I know exactly what you mean.
Number 18. The Grand Canyon Grim Reaper. This photo surfaced on Reddit in the early 21st century and has been the subject of much scrutiny ever since. The poster claimed that the photo, taken sometime in the 70s or 80s, shows his uncle standing on a rock ledge overlooking the Grand Canyon. What they didn't realize, until the photo was developed that is, was that a figure was standing in the foliage behind him. The person appears to be wearing a black cloak, looks much taller than a human, and very much resembles—
It's the Grim Reaper, dude! Oh.
The uncle and his friends who took the photo claim that they never saw the figure and were the only ones occupying that spot of the canyon. Anybody else have goosebumps?
Number 17, the Solway Firth Spaceman. An astronaut? A ghost? A beekeeper? This mysterious figure in white has fascinated people for decades. On May 23, 1964, English firefighter Jim Templeton was on a day trip in Cumbria with his wife Annie and daughter Elizabeth. He snapped 3 photos of his daughter, only to discover that the middle photo included someone standing behind her. After he brought it to the press, the photo went viral. And naturally, we guess, a lot of people concluded that extraterrestrials must be to blame. Investigative journalist David Clark has suggested the figure was Templeton's wife, and that her dress showed up as white due to overexposure. A trick of the camera or aliens? We'll let you decide. Number 16, the Hook Island Sea Monster. Located off the coast of Queensland, Australia, Hook Island is one of the beautiful Whitsunday Islands. It made international news in 1964 after a man named Robert Le Sirach released a series of photos he took in Hook Island's Stonehaven Bay. The photos seem to depict a massive tadpole-like creature under the surface of the water. A small boat with a human passenger can be seen near the monster's tail, giving the photo a sense of scale. It is by far one of the most popular photographs in cryptozoology and has been widely discussed and theorized about for decades. Number 15, the Hampton Court Ghost. By the River Thames in the Greater London area is Hampton Court, a popular royal court palace dating back to the early 16th century.
Many have lived and died here. Small wonder then that it is often considered to be one of the most haunted buildings in Britain.
In the winter of 2003, security was continuously called to the palace's clock court, as a fire escape door kept opening on its own. Upon looking at the security footage, they were met with a horrifying sight.
A figure, a rather strange, tall, spare figure, appears after the doors open and closes them.
What looks like a cloaked and skeletal figure can be seen opening and closing the doors. That very same day, a tourist had reported seeing a ghostly figure in the exact same area. If this is indeed a ghost, then the Hampton Court Palace needs an exorcist.
What's important, what's interesting, is not who closed these doors, but what opened them.
Number 14, the Falcon Lake Incident. Canada is home to one of the most documented and convincing UFO stories in modern history. A man named Stephen Michalak claimed to have been burned by a UFO near Manitoba's Falcon Lake in May 1967.
According to Stephen, the craft rotated counterclockwise, knocking him backwards and setting his shirt on fire.
In fact, the supposed attack has become such an integral part of Canadian legend that it was depicted on the Royal Canadian Mint's $20 silver coin. The famous picture shows Michalak sitting in a bed with numerous circles burned into his skin in a grid-like pattern. One skeptic believes that Michalak was injured while prospecting for ore, and that he lied about a UFO to scare other prospectors away. However, that's just one theory of many. The truth remains unknown.
Stephen still is not sure what it was he saw back in 1967.
Number 13, the skunk ape. Every region has its own unique cryptozoological creature, and Florida has the skunk ape. As its name suggests, the skunk ape is said to resemble a walking ape, specifically an orangutan, and carries a horrible odor.
They got a smell. It's a definite odor. Smells like a wet dog or a goat, maybe.
It's essentially the Sasquatch of the East, and a stinky one at that. The most famous photo of the skunk ape is known as the Mayaka photo, and it depicts a large, black, and hairy creature with red eyes and sharp bottom teeth. The photo was taken by a Florida woman who noticed that a creature was stealing apples from her backyard. Believing it to be an escaped orangutan, the woman notified the police. However, the creature had escaped by the time they arrived.
There are a lot of people who went into the woods around here and never came out.
Number 12, the backseat ghost. In 1959, Mabel Chinnery took one of the most famous ghost photographs of all time. Chinnery was visiting her mother's grave and had brought along a camera. She took a spontaneous photo of her husband, who was waiting in the car nearby.
When the picture was developed, the couple noticed the eerie visage of a mysterious person sitting in the back seat. The person appears to be wearing glasses, and their white collar shirt is readily apparent. Chinnery claimed that the mystery person looks exactly like her deceased mother. Some skeptics believe this is a case of double exposure or some type of reflection or trick of the light, but others are not so sure. Number 11. The SS Watertown Haunting. In 1924, 2 crew members of the SS Watertown died mysteriously while cleaning a cargo tank. The deaths were attributed to leaked gas fumes in the closed quarters, and since the ship was nowhere near land, the bodies were buried at sea. In the days following the burial, the crew reported seeing the faces of the dead in the waves, and several photos were taken of the water. All of them came out normal, except for this one. What's more, this photo reportedly survived several investigations by experts who concluded it has never been doctored. While a few articles like those in the Fortean Times claim to debunk the photo, conclusive evidence against its veracity has yet to be agreed upon. Number 10. The Hessdalen Lights. Since at least the 1930s, strange lights have appeared in the skies around Norway's Hessdalen Valley. Balls of light of different colors that hover or move sharply across the night skies. Occurring with alarming regularity between 1981 and 1984, the lights attracted tourists, who could see the lights 15 to 20 times a week on average. One photo captured the phenomenon incredibly, with the lights appearing as a giant ethereal cluster with a prismed rainbow reflected underneath. Though UFOs are often cited as the supposed culprit, scientists have come up with several hypotheses ranging from the combustion of natural elements to the ionization of certain particles. The lights still occur in the early 21st century, but less frequently than before. The picture remains unexplained. Number 9. The Spectre of Newby Church. This 1963 photo taken of the Newby Church in North Yorkshire, UK, features an unexpected figure in the right corner. The spectre, the supposed ghost of a 16th century monk, appears to have a shroud over his face and his hands in a position of worship or mourning. Experts have examined the photo, and though the figure was theorized to be a case of double exposure, it was concluded that this is not the case, and that the photo is genuine. But that's not even the spookiest part. In relation to the items in the photo, the figure would be 9 feet tall. Number 8. Goddard's Squadron Ghost, also known as the Ghost of Freddie Jackson. If you're a connoisseur of ghost photos, this is your holy grail. Freddie Jackson was reportedly an air mechanic who was accidentally killed by an airplane propeller. 2 days after the accident, the squadron of Sir Victor Goddard took a photo together without Freddie. But sure enough, Freddie turned up when the photo was developed. In the back row on the left side, the face of the dead mechanic, not wearing a hat, appears behind one of the soldiers' heads. Believers insist that this photo is evidence of the presence of spirits in our physical world, especially considering it was produced in 1919, many years before modern photo tampering software could have rendered such a believable fake. Number 7. The Babushka Lady. No JFK conspiracy would be complete without the Babushka Lady. Many photos and videos of the assassination capture the lady in close proximity to the attack, including one taken moments after the shooting. Curiously, she doesn't duck or flee when it occurs. Instead, she's shown filming from a valuable point that would have provided priceless footage, which is why everyone tried to find her. Despite numerous claims by individuals, the Babushka Lady's identity has never been confirmed. The mystery surrounding her identity, attire, and actions puts her in the center of the conspiracy, with some thinking she might have had a role in the assassination itself. Number 6. The Black Knight Satellite. This photo, released by NASA in 1998, shows a large, irregularly shaped object orbiting the Earth. Conspiracy theorists believe this is an alien satellite that's been surveying our planet for 13,000 years. Their evidence runs all the way back to Nikola Tesla's 1899 radio experiment, in which extraterrestrial sounds were recorded, and the supposed satellite has been the supposed culprit for nearly every unexplainable radio signal in the years since. Space journalist and former NASA engineer James Oberg offers a much more reasonable explanation. It's a thermal blanket confirmed lost on one of the space missions, or some other type of debris, but this has yet to be proven. Number 5. The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. For 400 years, Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England has served as the seat of the Townsend family. Within its walls is the purported ghost of Lady Dorothy Walpole, the sister of Britain's first Prime Minister and wife of the violent Charles Townsend. It is also the setting of what's perhaps the most famous ghost photograph of all time. Taken by Hubert C. Provand and Indra Shira, the photo seemingly depicts the ghost of Lady Dorothy Walpole descending the estate's main staircase. It was spontaneously taken after Shira noticed a misty form on the stairs. The famous photograph was published in Country Life magazine in December 1936 and became a sensation. Number 4. The Deceased Husband. This famous photograph shows an elderly woman sitting on a chair and posing for the camera. Standing directly behind her is an elderly man. The story goes that the woman had been suffering from dementia and had been speaking out loud to her long-deceased husband. The woman's daughter took a photo of her mother and, upon development, saw the ghostly image of her deceased father. She also uploaded a black and white photo of her mother and father from their younger years, and the man in question shares an eerie resemblance to the one seen in the ghost photo. Number 3. The Tulip Staircase Ghost. In 1966, a former clergyman from White Rock, British Columbia, paid a visit to the Queen's House in the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, England. Believing he was alone, he took a photo of the historic Tulip Staircase. But after development of said photo, a mysterious figure is seen. An unmistakable entity, shrouded and despaired, looks like it's holding onto the railing and trying to climb the staircase. This section of the museum has long been rumored to be haunted, with strange paranormal phenomena having been reported in prior years. The photo was reportedly submitted for examination, and the findings stated that no alterations had been made. Number 2. The McMinnville UFO photos. They're among the most iconic UFO photos ever taken. In 1950, Paul and Evelyn Trent noticed a mysterious object hovering over their farm in McMinnville, Oregon. Paul was able to snap several photos before it zipped off. The photos caused quite a stir, appearing in Life magazine and newspapers, and igniting a debate that's never really ended. Various explanations have been suggested. Physicist Bruce Maccabee argues that the UFO was a, quote, real physical object. Skeptics are nonetheless convinced they were faked. The truth may be out there, but for now, it remains a mystery.
No, and they've taken another look at it as recently as 1999, and the government is still unable to debunk it.
Number 1. The Tank Man. One of the most famous photographs in human history depicts an unknown man standing in front of a column of tanks in China's Tiananmen Square. Taken in June of 1989, the photo remains censored in China, as is all mention of the Tiananmen Square massacre, in which hundreds to thousands of civilians were killed. Despite being an iconic photograph, the fate and identity of the Tank Man remains unknown.
And I looked and I said, this guy's crazy.
Some people believe he was taken and executed by the Chinese Communist Party. Others believe he escaped to Taiwan and became an archaeologist. Yet others believe that he was never in danger and continued to live a normal life on the Chinese mainland. It remains a tantalizing, fascinating mystery.
It really wasn't until years later that I realized what I had, which is an iconic photo.
Many eras in history are shrouded in creepy mysteries. And if you thought the Wild West was excluded from that, well, you'd be mistaken.
Kid, the next time I say let's go someplace like Bolivia, let's go someplace like Bolivia. Next time.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 creepiest mysteries about the Wild West.
I understand they threw parts of the spacecraft down in the well. Other people just took, and carried off what they could of it.
Top of the morning to you, girls.
Lonely. It's no use, Bill. They'll kill us.
No, they won't. Come here, Parson.
For this list, we'll be ranking the most interesting, intriguing, or otherwise creepy unsolved mysteries from the Wild, Wild West. Did we leave out any? Now let the top 10 of creepy mystery begin. Let's go. Number 10, the Bodie Curse. Today, Bodie is a historic California national park, but it's also a ghost town, a creepy relic from the bygone days of the gold rush. As such, it tends to be pretty tempting for those who want to take a piece of history with them for the road.
Blue gold. This will fetch a very fine price.
To prevent vandalism, the staff who patrol and maintain the park invented the idea of a curse that would bring bad luck upon anyone who took items from Bodie. The only thing is, it worked. The Parks and Recreation staff receive apology letters almost daily from people convinced they're suffering various ailments after stealing slices of Bodie history. Is it true? Well, we're not going to tempt fate and find out.
It vibrates.
I wouldn't touch that, all right?
Number 9, Tom Horn and Willie Nickel. Death is always a tragedy, even in the Old West. But did Tom Horn really shoot 14-year-old Willie Nickel? Or did he take the fall for someone else?
I want to kill you.
I'll just take it between us. It's who gets who first.
One thing's for sure, Horn shot a lot of people and was hired to root out cattle rustlers by any means necessary. But while there were witnesses who swore that the unapologetically violent Horn couldn't have committed the deed, the hired gunman ultimately hung for the crime regardless. Some historians claim that local citizens were tired of Horn hanging around and decided to frame him, while others believe that the gunslinger mistakenly thought Willie Nickel was actually his adult father. Since Horn usually shot his victims from hundreds of yards out, we'll probably never know the truth. Number 8, Lost Ships of the Desert. There are a number of folk tales that describe mysterious vessels having run aground in strange places, such as the Colorado Desert. One of these involves a Spanish galleon that's buried under what's now known as the Salton Sea. There's also a ship said to have belonged to the explorer Juan de Turbay, who, after becoming landlocked, escaped on foot and left a fortune in black pearls behind for future adventurers.
Welcome aboard the Black Pearl.
There's even stories of a Viking longboat showing up in the Mexican Badlands, although some historians chalk this one up to wild stories concocted by imaginative prospectors. Number 7, Where is Cochise? Cochise was chief of the Chakanan band of the Chiricahua Apache, an iconic leader in the Apache Wars, which took place roughly between 1849 and 1886. Cochise has many famous stories to his name.
Cochise will not speak with white men.
Won't send up smoke signals.
He will not come to see you.
As to how his story ends, however, there remains much mystery. No one knows the location of his grave. It is known that Cochise died of natural causes in 1874 and that he's buried somewhere in Arizona's Dragoon Mountains. His people knew the exact location, as did Cochise's friend and peace broker Tom Jeffords, but no one was telling at the time. Today, there's no one alive that knows where Cochise lays in rest. It is an enduring mystery. Number 6, did Bill Longley cheat death? There was more than one Wild Bill out there in the Old West.
Please, Paul, please don't put me in with Wild Bill.
Enter Wild Bill Longley, an infamous gunfighter who was tried and hung for the murder of his childhood friend, Wilson Anderson.
Bill Longley was wanted for a dozen killings. Before Longley was jailed for murder, he held up to Burleson Depot in Texas and escaped with $50,000 of the railroad's money.
Or was he? Well, actually, he was, as DNA evidence obtained from an exhumation in 2000 by the Smithsonian proved. However, for years, there were reports that it was actually a family relative of Bill's that lay in that grave.
All right, Longley, come on out with your hands up.
So, is that DNA evidence of a body swap, or is the discovery of a Catholic medallion reportedly worn by Longley on that fateful day irrefutable proof that Wild Bill bit the bullet? The debate continues.
Papers say I killed 32 men. You probably want to know why. Well, it was revenge, I guess, mostly.
Number 5, Henry Plummer's Gold. Henry Plummer was playing both sides and getting away with it.
Nay, I solemnly vow here and now never to betray the trust that you've placed in me.
He was an elected sheriff for Bannock, Montana, while at the same time leading a group of outlaws known as the Innocents on raids, robberies, and shootings.
It's a holdup!
Time eventually caught up to Plummer and his cohorts. However, with many being tried and hanged for their crimes, others were taken out by vigilante posses in the area.
Oh, you murderer! You promised me! You told me you would not hang!
This woman's hysterical. She doesn't know what she's saying.
While Plummer himself was hanged on January 10, 1864. He was said to have left behind a stash of gold to support his wife, but if she knew where it was, she wasn't telling. Furthermore, Plummer was actually given a trial after his hanging. and that gold could still be out there. Number 4, John Baptiste. There's something truly reprehensible about robbing the dead.
Pay dirt.
If John Baptiste held any qualms about it, he hid them pretty well. Baptiste was a gravedigger who moonlighted as a grave robber. That is, until he was caught. He was exiled to a small island in Utah's Great Salt Lake and left to rot. 3 weeks later, officials came to check on him, but Baptiste was nowhere to be found. Parts of a small shack were torn down, presumably to build a makeshift raft, while a cow was also found skinned. Again, presumably to make leather. John Baptiste was never found. Not even the skeletal remains found near the island could be linked to the criminal, because these remains had a ball and chain attached to the leg, and Baptiste did not. Number 3, Butch Cassidy makes it out alive.
For a moment, I thought we were in trouble.
Movie fans remember the classic ending sequence to 1969's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where the infamous outlaws go out in a hail of bullets against the Bolivian army. But did Butch actually make it out alive? Many people were later quoted on their reported run-ins with Cassidy years after his reported death, with one report claiming that Butch had reconstructive surgery performed in Paris. Others say that Cassidy returned to see a family in Utah, while others still counter this by saying no one ever saw him arrive back home.
Who says?
Well, read them a clipping news.
Even DNA evidence acquired from a reported burial site under an area known as Tom's Cabin didn't prove enough to confirm that it was indeed Butch Cassidy, and so the legend lives on.
Oh, shit! You're drowning me! I can't help it, I can't swim! Get on, you're choking me, I can't swim!
Number 2, bring me the head of Pancho Villa. You don't have to know all that much about the Mexican Revolution or General Pancho Villa to be creeped out by our penultimate pick. That's because, well, it deals with a missing head. Villa was brutally assassinated in 1923 and interred in a mausoleum, which was where he stayed until sometime in 1926. It was then that his skull was stolen from the tomb and lost to the sands of time. Some claim that the secret Yale Society Skull and Bones have it locked up in their tomb, while older rumors have said that Villa's head was taken by adventurer Emil Holmdahl and sold to a mysterious benefactor who, collected famous heads. Now that's a creepy mystery. Number 1, Billy the Kid lives? Did Sheriff Pat Garrett really kill Billy the Kid?
Are you really gonna kill Billy the Kid?
Does a horse piss where she pleases?
Some say no, that Garrett actually helped the kid, born Henry McCarty, aka William H. Bonney, to escape. This flies against the coroner's jury reports that the body they examined was indeed McCarty. But hey, it sort of makes sense. What with Billy's legend being what it was.
Yeah, I'm here, you bastard!
Specifically, there was a man named Brushy Bill Roberts who came forward in 1948 seeking a pardon for Billy the Kid's crimes.
You asked me if I have scars. Yes, sir. I have my scars.
There was also the family of John Miller, who went so far as to have DNA examined in an inconclusive attempt to link Miller to McCarty. If the kid did make it out alive, he sure did a great job at keeping quiet.
We're not done with creepy coincidences just yet. That's because we got plenty more connections throughout history that are guaranteed to send chills down your spine.
And he saw Liège, 6.6 kilometers. That was frightening.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for circumstances so eerie and so unlikely that they send a slight chill up your spine.
Look what we made.
Number 20. Flight 666 flew into hell on Friday the 13th. Airports around the world are represented by three-letter codes. The code for Helsinki-Vantaa Airport, the primary airport of Finland's capital, is HEL. Finavia, the airport's owner, has had fun with the initials. In October of 2017, they had a PR campaign, #LifeInHell. It was a mixed media campaign with TV and online content. They even had a well-known Chinese actor spend a month living at the airport.
不要睡了，晚安，累不累？
3 days after the launch of the campaign, on Friday the 13th, Finnair's regular flight 666 from Copenhagen flew straight to hell. There was no bad luck to be found, but what a way to tempt fate. Number 19. November 9th, the German Day of Fate. Mark Twain once said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes." Germans know that Twain was right. Dating back to 1848, many history-shaping events of German history all occurred on the same day. November 9th is so significant in Germany, they have a name for it, Schicksalstag, or the Day of Fate. On November 9th, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated the throne, ending the 500-year reign of House Hohenzollern. Just a few years later, Hitler's failed beer hall putsch ended on November 9th, 1923, launching his political career. In 1938, on November 9th, the SS launched Kristallnacht, a violent pogrom against the nation's Jewry. It's not all dark history, however. November 9th, 1989 saw the fall of the Berlin Wall.
It has been an astonishing day. Hour after hour, all through today, thousands and thousands of West Germans have come to the wall to see for themselves.
Number 18. The graves of the first and last World War I casualties face each other. World War I was the bloodiest war in the history of England. The Battle of Somme, for instance, claimed more British lives than every single post-World War II British battle combined. The nation lost 6% of its total male population to the war. Many of those fallen soldiers rest in St. Symphorien Military Cemetery. However, there is an odd and unplanned coincidence with their graves. The first British casualty of the war was a young man named John Parr. The last was 30-year-old George Edwin Ellison. Parr and Ellison both lie at St. Symphorien, 7 yards apart and facing one another.
Private John Parr, the first British soldier killed, is buried here. So is George Ellison, the last, shot an hour before the ceasefire took effect.
Their graves act as somber bookends to a tragic chapter in their nation's history. Number 17. The Civil War began and ended on the same man's property. The first shots of the American Civil War rang out at Fort Sumter, South Carolina. It wasn't a battle per se. There were only 85 defenders, and the few casualties came from an accident during the surrender. The first pitched battle occurred later, with the First Battle of Bull Run in Manassas, Virginia. It was named for a stream that ran through the farmland of a grocer named Wilmer McLean. The battle was fierce and bloody, revealing to the country just how horrific a protracted war on American soil would become. After the battle, McLean fled his home to find safety. He moved to Appomattox, Virginia. 4 years later, Robert E. Lee incidentally surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant in the parlor of McLean's Appomattox home. Number 16. Major Summerford defied the odds in the worst way imaginable. Walter Summerford, a British major during World War I, was sent home from the front in Belgium in 1918. He wasn't hit by a bullet or a mortar shell. Summerford was struck by lightning. He was temporarily paralyzed from the waist down and sent back home. 6 years later, while fishing in a local river, Summerford was struck by lightning for a second time. Again, Summerford had to rehabilitate from temporary paralysis. Fast forward another 6 years, and the major's luck ran out. He was hit by lightning a third time during a stroll in the park. He struggled for 2 years in a hospital bed before succumbing. 4 years after that, his tombstone was struck by lightning. That's 4 strikes, one every 6 years.
Did I ever tell you, I've been struck by lightning 7 times. Once when I was repairing a leak on the roof.
Number 15. The comets hit by a meteor.
Meteor shower, take evasive action.
What's evasive action?
It's when you get out of the way of something.
What exactly am I supposed to get out of the way of exactly?
I have no idea. All it says is take evasive action.
There is a reason why meteors are incredibly valuable. Many meteoroids break up in the atmosphere after hurtling through space for millions or billions of years. According to National Geographic, the chances of getting hit by a meteor are approximately 1 in 1.6 million. In 2011, one meteoroid fell to Earth and landed on a house in France. Fortunately, nobody was hurt.
Danny, here! Danny, hurry up, it's safe! Danny, come on, hurry! Danny, come on, hurry up!
This sort of event was newsworthy thanks to its unlikelihood alone. However, There is an odd wrinkle to this particular story. The home was owned by the Comet family. Number 14. Anthony Hopkins and the Girl from Petrovka.
I'm very fortunate, very lucky. I sometimes pinch myself, think, how did it happen? But I think, well, you know, that's the way it is. It's an opportunity, luck, and goodness knows what it is. Maybe a little bit of talent.
In the early 1970s, Anthony Hopkins' career was stalling. He hoped to jumpstart it with an audition for The Girl from Petrovka, an adaptation of an American novel. Hopkins was desperate for a break and wanted to be as prepared as possible. He frantically searched for the novel, but learned it wasn't yet available in the UK. Despondent, he went to the subway and sat on a bench to wait for the train. He noticed a bound manuscript on the bench next to him.
The blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light.
One for the exact book he was searching for. He got the part, and a year later met the author on set in Vienna. He then learned that the author had lost that same copy in a stolen car.
She calls him a little hamster, feeding him all the crumbs, forcing him to survive.
Number 13. The Curse of the Omen.
It was an aura of not being welcomed. I mean, the devil was I really sincerely believe that the devil didn't want the picture to be made.
Horror movies like The Exorcist are famous for having productions plagued with creepy tragedies. Few such movies appear to be as cursed as 1976's The Omen. Both before and after the film, the cast and crew began to suffer strange accidents. Star Gregory Peck's son took his own life after Peck took the role. Special effects guru John Richardson oversaw the film's death scenes. On his next gig, he and his girlfriend were in a car crash where she died in a manner similar to one death in The Omen. Both screenwriter David Seltzer and executive producer Mace Neufeld were on airplanes struck by lightning. It's hard to discount the possibility that the film was in fact cursed.
He says, if you guys go ahead and make this movie, before you are done, you will believe the devil exists.
Number 12. Stephen Hawking's Birthday and Death Day.
We will discover new structures when look at the universe on smaller and smaller scales.
Stephen Hawking was one of the most famous physicists and cosmologists of the 20th and 21st centuries. He built on the work of astronomers and mathematicians going all the way back to Galileo. He deepened our understanding of the Big Bang, black holes, and time. Coincidentally, Hawking was somewhat famously born on the 300th anniversary of Galileo's death. Adding to the creepy and bizarre symmetry, Hawking died on the birthday of Albert Einstein. It was as if the universe was determined to inextricably link three men responsible for our understanding of the cosmos.
Does that mean that there is a universe out there where I am smarter than you?
Yes, and also a universe where you're funny.
Number 11. John Wilkes Booth's brother saved Abraham Lincoln's son.
So that moment where the whole future looked like had finally lifted, the clouds had separated, comes crashing down.
Robert Todd Lincoln, the only of the president's children to outlive his parents, himself had a long and storied career. Lincoln was at one time the Secretary of War, as well as the U.S. ambassador to the UK. That may never have happened if it weren't for the intervention of a Good Samaritan.
This is just a clumsy attempt at discouragement. I've been to Army hospitals, I've seen surgeries, I went and visited the malaria barges with Mama.
Lincoln was in New Jersey waiting for a train in the middle of a crowd. He slipped and fell onto the platform. Thankfully, an onlooker managed to pull Lincoln back onto the platform in time to avoid the oncoming train. That man was Edwin Booth, brother to the man who would ultimately kill Lincoln's father, John Wilkes Booth. Coincidentally, Lincoln was also present at the assassinations of Presidents Garfield and McKinley.
I want to be useful, but now, not afterwards.
I ain't wearing them things, Mr. Slade. They never fit right.
Number 10. The beginning and end of life.
Should we go buy one of those?
Yeah, I was probably gonna
go back later?
Yeah.
Life magazine helped define popular American culture in the 20th century. It was ubiquitous, on shelves of every magazine stand, waiting room, and grocery checkout in the country. The first issue of the magazine as we currently know it was published on November 23, 1936. The first interior photo in the magazine's history was a picture of a baby being cradled by his doctor after being delivered. The caption read, "Life Begins." That baby was George Story, who himself ultimately grew up to become a journalist. Decades later, on April 4th, 2000, Life magazine announced that it would stop publication. Story died of heart failure a few days later.
When I was growing up, that was, you looked at Life magazine and that was how you saw the world.
Number 9, a Dutch cyclist and plane crash dodger. Martin de Jong is a former professional cyclist from Holland. His career peaked in 2014 with a first-place win in Stage 4 of the Tour of Thailand. What makes de Jong's life remarkable is not his career. Instead, he's known for his shockingly good luck. The same year that de Jong won the aforementioned race, 2 separate Malaysia Airlines flights crashed. One, Flight 370, went missing. The other, Flight 17, was shot down over Ukraine by Russia. De Jong was allegedly planning to be on both flights. In the case of Flight 370, he decided to take a flight earlier in the day. With Flight 17, he ultimately chose a cheaper flight home. Number 8, Bruce and Brandon Lee in Game of Death and The Crow.
Listen! I'm sure you'll remember. You killed them on Halloween.
Despite Bruce Lee's incredible fitness, he died suddenly at the age of 32 due to an allergic reaction to painkillers. Lee was in the middle of a movie production, filming Game of Death. The film was rewritten and partially reshot with a double in order to finish. In one scene, a prop master on a film set explains to a group of extras how to use a prop gun.
Gentlemen, these are blanks. Only aim upward. There's a wad of paper that comes out and can injure someone.
One of them replaces a blank with a real bullet to try and kill Lee's character. The scenes are eerily reminiscent of the death of Lee's son Brandon decades later. While shooting The Crow, Brandon Lee died when a prop gun was misloaded. That film, too, was recut and partially reshot in order to finish. Number 7, Hitler and Napoleon.
Was nach diesem Kampf übrig bleibt, sind ohnehin nur die Minderwertigen, denn die Guten sind gefallen.
In all of history, only Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler have come close to conquering all of Europe. What is creepy is that their lives, rises to power, and falls mirror each other incredibly well. Separated by 120 to 130 years, their journeys were strikingly similar. Both were born in a country different from the one that would come to rule. Both seized power in a former superpower weakened by defeat in a previous war. They both utilized shockingly effective new military tactics to quickly conquer their neighbors, leaving England isolated and alone. Each leader was weakened by resistance movements in the territories they conquered, and ultimately they were each undone by a poorly conceived invasion of Russia, each defeated by the bitter cold.
Reichsleiter, es ist passiert.
Number 6, James Dean's death and his cursed Porsche. Like Marlon Brando, James Dean was a method actor of the new school.
I mean, I don't want to hurt him, but then I don't know what to do anymore except maybe die.
Between his good looks and his intense performances, the sky was the limit for his career. Unfortunately, he died in 1955 while driving his brand new Porsche 550 Spyder. There were many odd and spine-tingling coincidences surrounding the crash. Dean was with fellow actor Alec Guinness when the car was delivered. Guinness took one look at the machine and allegedly said, quote, "Please never get in it. It is now 10 o'clock, Friday the 23rd of September, 1955. If you get in that car, you will be found dead in it by this time next week."
And I said, look, I won't join your table unless you want me to, but I must say something. Please do not get into that car.
End quote. Pieces of the car would later get resold and caused multiple further accidents and 2 fatalities. Number 5, author Morgan Robertson predicted the Titanic. In 1898, author Morgan Robertson wrote a novella called The Wreck of the Titan, or Futility. His fictional Titan is a British passenger liner marketed as the largest and most unsinkable ship in the world. On its maiden voyage to America in the North Atlantic, on a cold April night, the Titan strikes an iceberg on the starboard side. Possibly due to the hype around the Titan's unsinkability, the vessel doesn't have enough lifeboats.
Colonel, are there any boats on that side?
No, miss, but there are a couple of boats all the way forward. This way, I'll lead you.
Most of the passengers and crew do not survive. 14 years later, an actual ocean liner suffered a virtually identical fate. So many of the details, down to the ship's name, Titanic, mirrored Robertson's book to a T.
There were 20 boats floating nearby, and only one came back.
Number 4. JFK may have predicted his own assassination.
What did the bullet sound like?
On November 22, 1963, all of the United States came to a standstill with the news that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated in Dallas. 9 years later, 2 of his closest friends and aides wrote a memoir about JFK titled Johnny We Hardly Knew Ye. In that book, authors David Powers and Kenneth O'Donnell describe the events of that November morning.
And the crowd is absolutely going wild. This is a friendly crowd in downtown Dallas as the President and the First Lady pass by.
Jackie Kennedy had seen an anti-JFK ad in a local newspaper that was designed to resemble a funeral notice. It shook her terribly. The president allegedly responded, quote, "We're heading into nut country today, but Jackie, if somebody wants to shoot me from a window with a rifle, nobody can stop it, so why worry about it?" End quote.
All the demands I made to honor him, it wasn't for Jack or his legacy. It was for me.
Number 3. The Hoover Dam Tragedies. The Hoover Dam was one of the greatest American engineering marvels of the 20th century. At the time, it was the largest hydroelectric plant on Earth. Even today, it provides electricity for over 1 million Americans in 3 states. Construction took 5 years between 1931 and 1936, but plans for the dam began in the early 1920s. It was a massive undertaking and one that ultimately cost the lives of 112 men. The second death associated with the dam occurred on December 20th, 1922, when surveyor John Gregory Tierney drowned in the Colorado River. The final death occurred exactly 13 years later on December 20th, 1935. The man who died that day was Tierney's son, Patrick. Number 2. Predicting Pearl Harbor.
We got high-level bombers. They're gonna bust this hangar wide open. Grab the 50s, let's move!
Mere weeks leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor, a peculiar set of advertisements for a board game ran in the New Yorker that sparked a short-lived conspiracy theory. The ad was for a game called The Deadly Double, and in hindsight was filled with what seemed to be warnings for the aerial strike. The word warning was written on the promotion itself and featured an illustration of people playing the dice game in an air raid bunker. Arguably the strangest synchronicity was the numbers on 2 of those dice being 12 and 7, corresponding to the date of the attack. The theory was investigated, but it was revealed that these ads truly were nothing more than coincidences. Number 1. One man survived both Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
I was telling my company supervisor in Nagasaki that one bomb had destroyed all of Hiroshima. He told me I was crazy. Just as he said that,
Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a Japanese draftsman for Mitsubishi. In the summer of 1945, he was on an extended business trip to Hiroshima. On August 6th, the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on the city. Yamaguchi saw the plane fly by and drop the bomb. He was lucky. While he suffered severe burns, he survived in a shelter with colleagues. The next day, he returned to his home city of Nagasaki. 3 days after surviving a nuclear bomb, Yamaguchi was at work describing the experience to his boss when the second bomb fell. He was again far enough away from the blast to survive, suffering radiation poisoning with a week-long fever. He died at the age of 93 in 2010.
He was in his office with his supervisor and colleagues, and at that moment, the Nagasaki bomb blasted.
Did a twist of fate leave a creepy coincidence off our list?
It's only fair that for our last video today, we share some answers. That's right, here are some creepy mysteries that were finally solved.
Well, I guess that explains everything.
Not everything.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 creepiest mysteries that were finally solved.
You know, all these funny parallel trails that are clearly there's some sort of common force involved.
For this list, we're looking at puzzling crimes and historical events that were eventually resolved. Are you satisfied with these answers? Number 20, the fate of the Franklin expedition.
I will not lose another man, Francis.
We may lose all our men.
For centuries, explorers sought out a northwest passage between the Atlantic and Pacific through the Arctic Ocean, but their expeditions often ended in disaster.
It's the ice, Georgie. It's only the ice.
One of the most famous was British Royal Navy officer John Franklin's in 1845. His expedition's ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, never returned. Search parties recovered only artifacts and human remains. With the passing of time, however, we've pieced together the full story. The ships got trapped in pack ice, and the crew died from starvation, hypothermia, and disease. The sunken Erebus and Terror were finally found in 2014 and 2016, respectively. Number 19, Pierre April.
Some lumps of things come back that are not especially pleasant.
Imagine waking up in a ditch with only $17 in your pocket and no idea who you are or where you came from. That's what happened to amnesiac Pierre April in May 1992. April was found wandering the streets of San Diego and taken to a shelter. Pieces of his life started coming back to him, including faces and talents, but nothing came of his attempts to connect to his past life. In September, his case was featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
I was so sure this city would bring everything back, and it did not.
This episode was seen by an old colleague of April's named Carol. She phoned the show's tip line and told them all they needed to know. April was happily reunited with his family, and his memory has since recovered.
It is strange to be told who you are and what you did. I'm someone again.
Number 18, Umbrella Man. The assassination of John F. Kennedy in November 1963 prompted countless conspiracy theories. Some of the more interesting ones were about a figure spotted in photos and films of the event, who had been brandishing an umbrella despite the sunny weather.
In all of Dallas, there appears to be exactly one person standing under an open black umbrella.
Could he have been complicit in the assassination? He remained a mystery for 15 years, until 1978, when Louis Stephen Witt came forth. Witt identified himself as the Umbrella Man and said that the umbrella was meant as a symbolic protest against Kennedy. An umbrella had been the trademark accessory of British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, infamous for initially appeasing the Nazi Party.
It was a reference to Neville Chamberlain's umbrella.
And with that, one of the world's most tantalizing mysteries fizzled out with a disappointing answer.
Oh, I see. Then everything is wrapped up in a neat little package. Really, I mean that.
Number 17, the Paulding Light of Michigan. Speaking of horribly disappointing answers, let's discuss the Paulding Light.
We came out here because somebody had heard about it. We were just sitting around on a night, and some local people that we knew had heard about this.
Paulding is a small community in western Michigan that houses a famous piece of folklore.
One popular legend says that the light is produced by the wayward spirit of a train conductor killed when his locomotive derailed.
Just outside of town, onlookers can spot a bright light flashing on and off at the end of a valley. The people of Paulding have many supernatural explanations for this light, including ghosts. One particularly creepy story claims that it's a grandparent looking for their lost grandchild with a flickering lantern. But the truth is far more boring. Turns out it's actually just headlights from a nearby highway. So, yeah, bummer.
Had people standing here having the pictures of the vehicles on the screen of the computer, and it's like, well, that's it, and they still won't believe it.
Number 16, the Somerton Man. One of Australia's enduring mysteries may have been finally solved in the summer of 2022. On December 1st, 1948, a body was found in Adelaide's Somerton Park. He was wearing American clothes embroidered with the name Keen. Inside his pocket was a scrap of paper reading Tamam Shud, Persian for is finished. The book that this paper was torn from was eventually located, and investigators found cryptic text written on the cover.
We looked for people with no date of death on that tree, and there was one that stood out.
In July 2022, DNA helped identify the man as Carl Webb. It's also now believed that the cryptic text found in the book were the names of horses, as Webb often gambled on horse racing. And finally, the clothes were likely passed down from his nephew, who once lived in the United States. Number 15, the Bloop. Many people have a fear of the deep ocean, and it's because of things like this. The bloop was a very loud underwater noise captured in 1997 by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It was so loud that it was detected by sensors over 3,000 miles away. It doesn't sound like much at normal speed, but it takes on its signature bloop noise when sped up. Believers in Cthulhu immediately went to giant underwater monster, but once again, the truth is more mundane. It wasn't a massive creature, but an ice quake as a result of glacial movements. Man, science can't let us have any fun. Number 14, Anastasia's fate.
The grave, there was supposed to be 11 bodies, but only 9 were there.
On July 17, 1918, far-left revolutionaries, the Bolsheviks, murdered the Russian Imperial Romanov family. In the aftermath, rumors circulated that Grand Duchess Anastasia, who was 17, had somehow escaped and survived. Her body could not be located, and several people came forward claiming to be the lost Anastasia. However, these stories turned out to be outright lies or the result of mental health issues, as was the case with famous imposter Anna Anderson. The long-standing rumor was officially put to rest when the remains of the royal family were identified with DNA. Grand Duchess Anastasia was among them, proving that she died with the rest of the Romanovs. Number 13, Lady Be Good. The World War II bomber Lady Be Good was used to conduct a raid on Naples on April 4, 1943. However, it disappeared on its way back to Libya, and both the plane and its crew were considered lost. No one knew what happened, and the plane was not recovered. That is until 1958, when the crashed aircraft was spotted in the Libyan desert. This raised even more questions, as the plane was remarkably preserved and showed no signs of the crew.
Where's the pilot? I don't understand! Where's the crew? Hey!
All the questions were subsequently answered after an investigation. The pilots had gotten lost in a sandstorm and ejected from the craft when it ran out of fuel. The plane crashed, and the men died while walking through the desert. Number 12, Sailing Stones. It's one of the most bizarre sights that can be seen in nature. A lone rock stands in the middle of the desert. A massive trail snakes behind it, as if it's been pushed across the ground. However, no footsteps and no signs of animal activity can be found. These stones are especially notable in the racetrack playa of California's Death Valley.
All these funny parallel trails that are clearly there's some sort of common force involved.
So just what the heck is going on with these rocks? The phenomenon has tantalized researchers for decades, but the mystery has only recently been cracked. The valley floor produces a very thin layer of ice, and the rocks slide across these sheets when the ice starts to melt. The movement leaves indentations in the ground, resulting in their signature trails. Number 11, the death of Junlin.
His mother still worried about him living in a big foreign city, so he'd walk the streets with his cell phone and stream images back to her. His message to her in their daily conversations was always the same. Don't worry, he told her. I'm safe.
One of the most notorious videos in the history of the internet was uploaded on May 25, 2012. Titled One Lunatic, One Ice Pick, it depicts an Asian male getting killed and dismembered by an unidentified figure.
So you could see that clearly the murder happened on the bed.
Various body parts were then sent to schools and federal offices across Canada, and these remains were linked to the man who was killed in the video. The case made international headlines and remained a mystery for several days. But investigators quickly traced the grisly homicide to a man named Luca Magnotta, who had already fled the country. An international manhunt ensued, and Magnotta was finally captured in Berlin on June 4th, about a week and a half after uploading the infamous video.
Luca Magnotta, who's been the focus of an international manhunt since fleeing Canada last week, was arrested by police at an internet
He will eventually face Canada's justice system. He's expected to go before a judge tomorrow.
Number 10, the face on Mars.
Was there once an advanced civilization on Mars? Some of the features on the planet's surface definitely make you wonder.
This is one of the most popular space images of all time. Taken by the Viking orbiters back in the mid-70s, the picture depicts the Cydonia region of Mars. People immediately noticed that one of the features bore a striking resemblance to a human face, or maybe one of those old-school hockey masks.
Everything is proportional. If the face is 1.5 miles, 2 miles long, the eyes 1/4 mile, nose about 1/2 mile. So it's not small structure, it's very large structure.
Speculation immediately flew to aliens or some kind of human habitation on the supposedly barren planet. But nah, the answer is much more boring. Turns out this was just an optical illusion, the result of lighting, angle, and a low-resolution picture. More recent and much better photos have been taken of the same location, and they reveal nothing but a boring hill with face-like characteristics. Number 9. The construction of the pyramids. The Giza pyramids are arguably the most famous landmarks in the world. They continue to stand tall literally after thousands of years. Their construction has baffled people for millennia, leading some to suggest that aliens must have been involved. After all, humans couldn't possibly drag and lift those stones into place, right? Well, yes, they could. Researchers believe that workers loaded the blocks onto sledges and wet the sand to make them easier to drag. They raised the blocks using ramps and levering techniques. This took tens of thousands of people decades to complete. But hey, no one said building a wonder of the world was easy. Number 8. The Tunguska event. In the early morning of June 30th, 1908, a remote area of Russia was hit with a massive and mysterious blast.
In 1 hour, the explosion and the great fire that followed destroy a region of forest the size of Greater London.
People who observed that thought the end of the world had come, Judgment Day, divine intervention.
This blast completely leveled over 800 square miles of forest and flattened 80 million trees. No source could be found for the explosion, so no one knew what exactly happened.
It's an event and it's a mystery that would take 105 years of research before we could finally write the words. The end.
Thousands of scientific papers have been written about the incident, and the area has been studied for decades, with many trying to crack the bizarre case. It is now generally agreed that a 200-foot meteor traveling 60,000 miles per hour exploded in midair over the area, resulting in what's called a meteor airburst. This airburst then leveled everything below the meteor's detonation site.
If it was a meteorite and the Earth had turned a bit further, it would have destroyed St. Petersburg. An hour later, it would have destroyed Helsinki. 1 hour later, Stockholm, and after that, Oslo.
Number 7. The death of Ryan Stallings. Patricia Stallings brought her sick baby Ryan to the hospital. The doctors found what they thought was ethylene glycol in the baby's blood, leading them to conclude that he had been poisoned. He recovered, but Patricia was suspected of the poisoning, and Ryan was sent to live elsewhere.
And I was devastated. I was blown away. I just could not believe that they could even think. I mean, Ryan was my world.
Following a future visit, Ryan fell sick again and died. Patricia was again blamed for poisoning Ryan and charged with homicide.
His mother, Patty, was now charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. She was not allowed to attend Ryan's funeral.
She later gave birth to another son, and he exhibited the same symptoms. It was later found that both children suffered from a disorder called methylmalonic acidemia. An acidic byproduct of the disorder can be mistaken for ethylene glycol.
It would be very simple to confuse the diagnosis of MMA with multiple poisonings because the symptoms are very similar.
Patricia was released from prison and successfully sued the lab that tested Ryan's blood. Number 6. Stonehenge.
The awe-inspiring stone circle is an enduring mystery. Despite centuries of intense scrutiny,
one of humanity's greatest marvels, Stonehenge has been standing for thousands of years.
The widely accepted theory is that the Stonehenge landscape was a large cemetery, a place to bury and worship the dead.
But where exactly did the giant stones come from? They're all pretty much symmetrical, 13 feet high, 7 feet across, and each weighing 25 tons. Experts have been trying to crack the case for hundreds of years. Some will have you believe that it was aliens, but no. It was really just the nearby woods. In 2019, researchers were able to do tests on a small area of extracted stone and sourced it to the nearby Westwoods in Wiltshire. The location has finally been pinned down, but one tantalizing question remains. How did they drag these 25-ton boulders 15 miles to the south?
Clearly some very, very powerful people around at that time who were being able to control resources, control the labour force, to create some of the largest monuments we've ever seen.
Number 5. the Centennial Olympic Park criminal.
The North Carolina mountains, ground zero for the largest, most expensive fugitive search in United States history.
On July 27, 1996, Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park was bombed during the Summer Olympic Games. The blast injured hundreds, but thanks to the heroic efforts of security guard Richard Jewell, direct deaths were limited to 2 people.
Move away from the town! Go toward the street, anything but here! Are you kidding me? We gotta move, there's a bomb!
Jewell himself was initially pegged as the culprit, but he was eventually cleared and the case remained a mystery for several years. The FBI was eventually led to a man named Eric Rudolph, who had committed various other bombings across the American South. Rudolph was finally arrested in 2003 and pleaded guilty to all charges. He was given 4 life sentences and is currently held in a supermax prison in Colorado.
He had 1 live bomb and 250 pounds of explosives buried in the mountains here. He agreed to tell the government where it all was in exchange for life sentences.
Number 4, the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi.
Trump administration touched off a new storm of criticism over the killing of Saudi writer Jamal Khashoggi.
The U.S. has sanctioned some Saudis in response, but the Crown Prince has yet to face any punishment.
The case of journalist Jamal Khashoggi was all over the news in the fall of 2018. On October 2nd of that year, Khashoggi went missing while visiting the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. At the time, Khashoggi was living in exile as he was penning scathing articles that criticized the Saudi Arabian rulers.
And I think his knowledge of the regime added credibility to his profession as a journalist when he spoke out.
While his fate remained a mystery for weeks, most people had a good idea what happened. Khashoggi was killed inside the consulate. It was eventually revealed that Khashoggi did indeed die inside the building, and on October 25th, Saudi Arabia's Attorney General admitted that it was a premeditated homicide. The CIA later concluded that Khashoggi was assassinated on the orders of Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman.
There was credible evidence that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other Saudi senior officials were liable for the killing.
Number 3, the Golden State Killer. One of the most notorious criminals in American history, the Golden State Killer has gone by many names. He terrorized California throughout the 70s and 80s, sexually assaulting at least 51 women, burglarizing over 100 homes, and murdering 13 people. He was given different names in different areas, including the Visalia Ransacker and the Night Stalker. Only with time did it become apparent that these crime sprees were the work of one person. The name Golden State Killer was coined in 2013 by crime writer Michelle McNamara. The case helped inspire the creation of California's DNA database. And it was DNA evidence that eventually nabbed Joseph James D'Angelo in 2018, who by then was 72 years old. He was sentenced to life in prison.
I think we all had come to terms that we would never see justice in this case. Neither one of them in any way, shape, or form should have ever died this way.
Number 2, the collapse of the Maya civilization. The largest and most sophisticated pre-Columbian civilization of the Americas, the Maya flourished for thousands of years.
They mastered mathematics and astronomy, perfected the first written language of the Western Hemisphere, and produced stunning works of art.
The civilization entered its so-called classic period in the year 250, and this lasted until 900. It was around then that the entire political system collapsed, and the Maya abandoned their most important cities to move north. With this, the Maya civilization entered what is called its post-classic period. So what the heck happened? It's a mystery that has plagued historians for years. The answer was finally found in the 21st century. It turns out the Maya were so overpopulated that they damaged the environment and created a devastating drought.
The extreme intensity of these droughts was disastrous, making a carefully managed response their only hope.
With their agriculture thoroughly destroyed, the Maya were forced to abandon their most populous cities.
Today, the empty jungles of the Yucatan serve as a reminder that even great civilizations can fail.
Number 1, the Vampire Clan. One of the creepiest episodes of Unsolved Mysteries involves Rod Ferrell and his so-called vampire clan.
Ferrell and his clan reportedly liked to play vampire at various places around town. One favorite hangout was an abandoned building they called the Vampire Hotel.
In November of 1996, Jennifer Wendorf found her parents beaten to death inside their Florida home. The case went unsolved for weeks, although police immediately suspected Farrell in the killing, as he was close to the Wendorf's other daughter, Heather. Farrell was the leader of a Kentucky cult centered around vampirism, and allegedly had prospective members drink his blood in order to join.
That he would cut his arm and let others suck his blood as sort of some kind of ritualistic, they call it being embraced into the family.
The grandmother of a member helped police apprehend the cult, and both Farrell and a man named Scott Anderson were found responsible for the Wendorf's deaths and given life sentences.
While the couple's daughter Heather was arrested, along with Farrell, Howard Scott Anderson, Dana Cooper, and Charity Kesey, all who were sent to prison. A grand jury believed Heather was unaware of the murder plot, and she was not tried.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this creeptastic deep dive through history. I've been Matt from Watch Mojo, and I'll see you next time.